What's going on? Welcome back to the channel and welcome back to the recap video series. I know it's been a while since my last one, but I am committed to catching up on all the events of the past year, let's say by the end of April. So here we are in September of 2022 still. My last recap video was on the New Jersey Open. But actually, a few weeks before that, I signed up for this kind of once a week club tournament at the West Orange Chess Club, which is called the End of Summer Spectacular. Going in, I was the second seed, rated in the low 2100s. The only player rated higher than me is a 2200 kind of floor master who is definitely getting up there in age. So my objective was to try to win this tournament, try to pick up some points. But I got off to a rough start. I actually drew an 1800 in the first round, and from a very bad position. I really messed up the opening. I was kind of on the back foot the whole game and managed to save it at the end, despite being close to lost at one point. Second game, I managed to bounce back and win, and this is now the third round. So it was actually played the day after the NJ Open finished. So these games are on Tuesday nights. NJ Open finished on a Monday, so I'm going into this having already played for a few days. Maybe a little bit tired, but it's just one game in the evening. Time control is game 75, 5 seconds delay. And my opponent was actually the only player in the tournament up to this point who was on 2 out of 2 in the open section. Rated right around 2,000. He had been over, fallen just under recently. And I didn't really know what he plays. I think I knew that he plays a Sicilian, but I had no idea what line. And he decided to play the accelerated dragon. So this is an opening which I hadn't faced over the board in quite a long time. And hadn't really been doing great against it online. Had been sort of trying to study it a little bit, but now we get a chance to actually play it in a serious game. So the point of the accelerated dragon is that black doesn't play d6 early like they would in a normal dragon, which means that they kind of discourage white from long castling, because if white plays queen d2 castles, black can oftentimes play d5 in one go and kind of break open the center before white gets a chance to get set and execute their attack. So the most common setup here, I mean, of course, if I really wanted to, let's back up, I could have opted for a Marazzi bind here with c4, but I've been playing this kind of just normal with knight c3, bishop c4, and here the move which white often plays, which might look a little funny if you've never seen it, it's actually bishop back to b3, because the black often has little tricks, little tactics aimed at the bishop, being kind of vulnerable on c4, sometimes d5 comes, or knight a5, and you just want your bishop to be secure. Black plays d6, which actually threatens knight to g4, so it's smart to stop that with h3. Again, I don't want to play f3 queen d2 because this setup by black is kind of good to deal with that. So h3 and short castle. So this I had all played pretty quickly. But rook c8, this is the first moment where I kind of took my time. I ended up playing a rook e1, which I kind of know to be a good move, but I kind of took my time here because when you're in a classical game, it's very different to when you're just playing a blitz game, so I really wanted to kind of get into the spirit of the position, try to understand what I'm actually trying to do here. So I play rook e1, just kind of involving the rook in the game. He goes knight a5, which turned out to be the main move of theory, which I didn't know at the time, but he's going after my bishop, so it makes sense. And he's also threatening to potentially put the knight on c4. For example, if I go queen d2, he could even not take but go knight c4, and it's a little bit annoying. Obviously, I'm going to have to trade, but then he has some pressure against this knight. He might even have ideas of giving up the rook for the knight to take on e4. So to kind of avoid all that, I decided to play queen d3, which stops knight c4, also lends a little bit of protection to the e4 pawn. And he just played a6, preparing to expand with b5. And I thought, again, for quite a while, in hindsight, I should have been playing these moves a lot quicker because, game 75 or game 80, if you count the delay, it's a decent chunk of time, but it's not really, slow classical where you have, 30-second increment. I mean, the time can really eat up pretty quickly here. So I ended up playing rook to d1, just kind of centralizing the rooks, kind of slowly building up, waiting to see what he does. He decided to play queen c7. He maybe could have played b5. I believe this is like the most critical move here, but he goes queen c7. And here I decided to go for knight d5, attacking his queen with tempo and inviting sort of like a little bit of a transformation where he takes and I take, which now means my pawn is no longer in the e file, it's now in the d file, which opens up the e file for my rook, which could be helpful. And here he could have maybe taken the bishop, maybe a rook e8 makes sense to just sort of like protect that pawn before it gets attacked. He played h6 though, which during the game I thought was a little bit strange. I mean, he probably doesn't want to allow me to play bishop g5 where I attack his pawn twice on e7. But yeah, I thought that was a little bit odd because he kind of weakened his king side a bit. And so I played c3, and he took the bishop before I could sort of bring it back to c2. I took with the pawn, and here he played rook e8. There was actually this one little tactic which I spent a little bit of time calculating. Like if he had played rook ft8, I was actually really trying to make this work. This is a very interesting sacrifice where if he takes it, I take on g6, and actually I have like a crushing attack because like all of his pieces are locked out on the opposite side, and I'm about to take on h6. The rooks are about to come in, and this would have been devastating. He moved the other rook, so he's kind of like prepared. Now this move doesn't really work because if I take on g6, he can just play rook f6. And yeah, that pretty much stops my attack. So I simply played c4, just trying to like strengthen my center a bit. And he played king h7, which again I thought was a bit odd. He maybe should have been looking at some kind of a pawn break, maybe b5 or e5. But he played king h7. And I was like, all right, I'm not going to waste any more time trying to do any kind of like fancy build-up stuff. h4. Because you put your king on this diagonal, I'm going to try to apply a little bit of pressure. So I go h4, sort of prompting him to play h5. And when he plays h5, though, he stops my pawn from advancing, but he also gives up control over the g5 square. So that's where I immediately put the bishop. And I attack the pawn on e7. I'm starting to gain up a little bit of momentum. Like I wasn't all that confident coming out of the opening because I felt like I was playing a bit slow. He obviously kind of knew the position a little bit better than me, but now I'm starting to get into the groove, forcing him to go back, and I'm like, okay, I'm attacking this pawn twice, he's defending it twice, how do we attack it again? We're going to need to double up the rooks. But of course, he's not just going to sit around and let me do that, so he plays e5, trying to attack the knight, trying to like either force me back or get me to take, and of course I'm going to take en passant. I mean, if I go back with the knight, he's going to get bishop f5 in. So I take, he takes the pawn. And now I brought the knight back to f3 to open up the queen and rook to hit this now weak pawn on d6. Since, you know, that's one of the consequences of this trade is that before I didn't have any ways to attack this pawn, but now suddenly it's a weakness. So I go knight back to f3. And he plays d5 now. Which is an interesting move. On the surface, it looks like it's sacrificing a pawn. That's what it seemed like to me during the game, is that he just wants to give up a pawn, but in return, he's kind of opening the center, and he does have the bishop pair, so kind of an open position could benefit him. And here is where I kind of just took fairly quickly. Like, I didn't really think about much else, but there was a move which actually I found in post-analysis, which would have been very interesting, and that's actually the move bishop back to c1. Not an easy move to kind of find, but the point is that I am vacating the g5 square, opening it up for my knight, and the bishop also is going to guard the b2 pawn, which could be important in some lines since this bishop attacks. So what could end up happening is, like, if he goes bishop f6, I could check him, and if he kind of lets that knight sit there, it could be very annoying for him. So most likely he would take, and then we'd have some kind of trade like this. Maybe he plays e5 to open up this diagonal for the bishop. But here, actually, because I control the d-file, and his king is a little bit weak, would be a decent position for me to try to like slowly, again, build on. Maybe try to infiltrate with the queen. Maybe march the pawns up a little bit. So that would have been a good way to go. But I was already down to about 30 minutes, so I took. And here I thought I'm just winning a pawn. I took on e8, he took, and then I took this pawn on d5 here. Now, he in this position, he could take on b2, but he surprised me by playing bishop e6. And then I realized that, okay, so his idea is that he's now attacking my queen. If I go back, I mean, if I go to d3, then the b2 pawn hangs, but if I go to d2, then the b3 pawn hangs. And I saw this position, and I didn't really think that I'm better here because material is even, but again, the position is open, and he has the bishop pair, so I thought that, like, if anyone's slightly better, it might be him. In hindsight, like, that might be not the most accurate evaluation because, again, his king side is a bit weak, so, like, I could bring the bishop back and plant the knight on g5, which actually gives me some chances still, but I decided not to go for this. I played queen e4. And I thought that this just like pins the bishop, and so he can't take on b3. But then he took on b3 anyway, and I was like, oh wait, I'm dumb because what I missed is that when I take his rook, he takes my rook. And he went for it. And so now we have this position where material is even, right? We're now kind of down to this like endgame where we each have a queen, 2 minor pieces. But when I kind of started to sit and think about this position, I was like, wait a minute. His king has no squares. His king is actually completely trapped. My queen is very active. His bishop on d1 attacks my knight right now. Like, what if I could somehow move the bishop from g5 and like put the knight there? I could have some kind of an attack even. And so I spent like maybe 5 minutes trying to work some stuff out. And I had a few ideas, but before I reveal what I should have played here, I'm going to let you pause, try to work it out for yourself. What do you think that I should go for here? So my 2 main moves were to consider. I knew I had to like do something with tempo, right? If I, for example, just go bishop e3, he takes on f3, I have to take back, and that's it. Like, he can even just take this pawn. He's better. So I have to make some move which attacks his queen. So either bishop d8 or bishop f4. I thought for a while, I ended up going bishop d8. Bishop f4, what I didn't like is that, obviously, he takes, he has to, because if he just moves the queen, I'm going to go, like, let's say queen b6, I go check. And I can go here and actually basically mate him on h7. He can take the bishop. I go check. And what I saw in my calculation is that I go to g8, and he's in time to take the pawn on h4, and now if I go queen h7, he takes my knight. And so when I saw that, I was like, all right, bishop f4 doesn't work. And guess what I missed? What I missed is that in this position, yeah, I don't have queen h7, but I have knight f7, and that's checkmate. For some reason in my mind, when I was calculating this, it just didn't click with me that even though the knight hangs, I can move the knight, and that makes a checkmate. So because I missed this little detail, I ended up not playing bishop f4, which it turns out is basically just completely winning. Because in this position, after knight g5, the only way he doesn't get mated is if he gives up his queen. And then, queen against 2 bishops should be a fairly easy job to convert this. So instead I go bishop d8, thinking that, okay, it's still good because I attack his queen. I'm going to go knight g5 next. But he plays queen c1. I realize that, okay, if I go knight g5 and king h8 and queen g8, thinking that I'm about to mate him, well, guess what? He has a trick up his own sleeve. He can go bishop b3 check and discovery against my king, and he's going to pick off my queen. So I had to basically improvise here. I decided to bring the queen back to e1 to pin his bishop, stopping him from any discoveries, but then he takes on b2. And now again, I had like a little feeling that I might have something here still, because all his pieces are kind of down here, and his king is kind of open, but I couldn't really find a way to get anything. I ended up playing bishop g5, but now he just plays queen a1, and everything is protected for him. What I actually missed in this position, like, I can't really blame myself because it's very tricky to see. I could have played this check, which of course I considered, and he has to move his king to h6 because if he goes anywhere else, he basically gets mated. Like, for example, here I have check. check, and checkmate. He has to go to h6, and now the move that I would have had to find is bishop e7. And the point is that I'm threatening bishop f8 check. So like, for example, if he plays a random move, check. And again, I bring the queen in, and it's going to be checkmate. Like, the king will be forced to either h6 or h8, and they'll be mates. So what he would have to do is bring his bishop back, and now I have to see knight e6. And the point is that I'm trying to take the bishop and then bring the queen in. And again, his pieces are paralyzed down here. So a sample line goes something like this. Check, check. His king gets chased down the open. Now I'm actually, by bringing the bishop back, I'm threatening to formulate some kind of a mating net. And like, even though he can give a discovered check, I just hide my king. It's crazy because it's like the opposite color bishop scenario here is everything. And his king is just a lot less safe than mine is. So he would have to go queen a1 to stop this check. And then actually this wins because I'm threatening queen g7 and attacking his queen. So that would have all been like very crazy to find, especially when me getting already pretty low on the clock. I just didn't see that chance. Played bishop g5. And now I realize that I am in big trouble because I allowed him to take a pawn on b2. He now has two connected pass pawns, which are going to be eventually decisive, and I have to do something quickly. So I gave this check. He comes back, and here I tried like kind of a desperate idea. I sacked the bishop, allowing him to take to give this check. The point is that if he goes to h6, I can kind of like repeat like this and make a draw. If he goes to g8, what I saw is that I have a check here, and then I have this move, and I threaten mate on h7, and I attack his bishop. But what I, of course, missed is that he can defend both of those by playing bishop d6. And now I'm just down a piece. And from here on, I tried to get some counterplay. Like, I tried to, create some kind of threats on the 7th rank. But he ended up stopping me, and I got way too low on the clock. Like, I was already down under 5 minutes, and when you're under 5 minutes, you can actually stop notating. So this was all I was basically able to recreate from memory. I threw in a couple checks. But eventually he managed to stop them, and I think actually he managed to checkmate me or get close to it because my king ended up just being more open than his. But yeah, this was like a brutal loss because I played the opening well, had a chance to win, missed it, then even had like another chance, which was a little bit crazy, but still was maybe within the realms of finding, but missed both of those, and I ended up losing the game. So this took me to 1.5 out of 3. I did then win the last two games against like low rated players like a 1900 and 1800, so I finished the tournament at 3.5 out of 5, but still not a good showing for a 2100. I'm not going to reveal what the rating change was because there's actually another tournament which I sort of played during the time that I was playing this one, which I will feature in the next video, but yeah, this was one of my most painful losses of the year, actually. So hopefully you learned something from it, and I will see you soon for the next recap.